Okay. We seem to be stationary, so I will kick it off. Welcome to this session about how to maximize in a post-pandemic world. I am Francesco Nava. I am the academic director of the LSE's partnership with the University of London International Program. I'm the academic director of the Economics, Management and Social Science degrees. I will give you a brief description in a moment. I'm a faculty member of the Economics department at the London School of Economics, and I'm also the director of the MSc program in Economics at LSE. So I would like, before I introduce the session, to welcome my other two panelists. And I will start with Elizabeth Darlington, who will introduce herself and give a brief description of her role at LSE.
Thanks, Francesco. Hello, everybody. It's lovely to have you here today. My name is Elizabeth Darlington, and I'm the Director of LSE Careers. Prior to working for LSE Careers, I've also worked at Oxford and Cambridge universities as a careers consultant. And prior to this, I actually worked in the graduate recruitment and development space for an investment bank and a fast-moving consumer goods company. So it's lovely to be with you here today and talking about careers in a post-pandemic world.
And next we go to Terence, who is an alumni of our international program and will be able to give you some inside experience into how it is to be a student on our degrees.
Yeah, so thanks, Francesco. So hi, everyone. My name is Terence and I come all the way from Singapore. So just a brief introduction about myself. I'm currently a business development associate at Salesforce. So I do things like pipe generation for our business for ASEAN markets. So the reason why I'm here today is because like what Francesco said, I'm a recent graduate of the EMFSS program. I'm actually from University of London, Singapore. So everything from graduation to job search to starting a new career, I've done all of these during these times, this COVID-19 period. So hopefully I can share my experiences with you guys, and hopefully can gather some tips on how to thrive on this era. So excited to be here, and let's get this started. Francesco, back to you.
Thank you, Terence. So I apologize for the unusual setting. I'm in Italy for my week of holiday. So I know Terence is in Singapore, Elizabeth is in London. So we're all scattered over the world nowadays, but we'll soon be all in London. So I want to start with a brief introduction to the session. Then we'll have several speeches from the three panelists. And then we will have a Q&A session where you will be able to tackle any questions that you may think important that we were unable to touch on. So welcome. So today's event has been organized on behalf of LSE's international program team. What is LSE's role in this University of London international program? Well, LSE provides academic direction for 14 BSc degrees, which are in economics, management, social science, and finance. This stands for EMFSS, which you will see in many of our materials and advertisements, which are organized by LSE and in conjunction with the University of London. What is LSE's role? Well, LSE designs the entirety of these degrees, meaning that we set syllabus for courses, we set degree structure, we overlook exam standards. Actually, exams are often set by LSE academic or seen and approved by LSE academic. So you should think about this degree being very close to what we teach on campus. So in fact, we strive to have that closeness, and the mission of this program is really to take the knowledge that we have at LSE and this modern thinking about social sciences to the wide world, which is one of the constant mission of the London School of Economics since its inception. So what is the role of the University of London? Well, the University of London, which is a big university that collects a lot of colleges over London, one of which is the London School of Economics, will be the awarding body for your degree, meaning that your degree will be a University of London degree, but all the content will be very close to what you would learn on campus, and exam standards will be the same as those that you would experience here on campus. So it's a strong degree that will give you a thorough preparation in the topics of your choosing, and that will prepare you for the job market around the world. Now, our degrees are taught by teaching centers that are scattered around the globe that we approve as the LSE international team approves with the help of the University of London. Now, teaching centers play an important role, and they provide to students invaluable networks of alumni, which you know is an important part of a degree. They provide students a campus environment and local academics to teach the content that we set. And so they play an important role for our degrees, and they're so important that often we send LSE faculty to visit and to present guest lectures at the local teaching centers. So this is a bit, I hope it gives you a sense of what the role is that LSE plays in these degrees. Now, to inform a bit our discussion, I would like to ask you a couple questions using polls. And the first question that I would like to ask you is, where are you based from? So that we can maybe cater the answers a bit closer to your needs. So if you are so kind to answer this question, it will give us a sense of where the majority of students present today are coming from. So please answer the poll, and so we can know what the answer is. Hopla. Excellent. See, someone is using the chat, but the poll. And we have the vast majority today is placed in Europe. We have several from South Asia and Southeast Asia, and a bit from Central Asia, fewer from the Americas. It may be the time zone. And yeah, I'm from Africa, so it's a very diverse community, so we'll try to keep the message as global as we can, as usual. And the second question I would like to ask you, so that we can cater our replies, is, what are your career goals after completing the BSc? Are you thinking about finding a job straight after your BSc degree, or are you thinking that further education, for instance an MSc, may be one of your objectives that you intend to pursue straight off the bat? So please give us your feedback on this, so we can maybe specialize a bit the discussion. Now, I understand that many of you may be thinking, yeah, maybe I finish my BSc degree, but then I will have a work experience and go back to MSc later. So if you are thinking about that plan, answer it as naturally as you can. Thank you.
50-50, pretty much.
Yeah, it seems like an even break. So yeah, that's quite representative of our student body in general. Many of them want to pursue further studies. Often they take a few gap years into the work environment. So we're here to help you get a sense of what this is. Now, I would like to start by chatting a bit about the current market and the implication on the pandemic on your job search. And I would like this part of the discussion to be kicked off by Elizabeth, who's very knowledgeable. And so, Elizabeth, what is your experience for students finishing their studies in the current market? What has happened this year? How have you advised them? What has been their placement? Thank you.
Thanks, Francesco. That's really helpful. In terms of graduates kind of coming out into this market, it is a difficult time, and I think nobody can think kind of beyond that. Things have changed remarkably. So one of the first things is that graduates need to be very ready for a virtual assessment process and applications to be taking place. So most of our graduates are looking to be doing online assessment centres, virtual interviews, and employers are looking to keep those going for the foreseeable future. So in our regular conversations and updates with employers, this is the way that they want to take things forward whilst we're working in this environment. So we've been helping our students and graduates really prepare for this by running things like virtual mock assessment centres, virtual interviews, and making sure that they're really prepared for what is, let's be honest, a different environment where you're having to express your skills and your experiences online. In terms of jobs, in the graduate market, though they are down, it would be wrong to say that they were kind of at the same level that they were prior to the pandemic. We are getting a strong message from global employers that actually there are still jobs available at this graduate level, and that students need to, and graduates need to keep engaging. They need to keep checking online and not just take the negative news stories and press stories that we're seeing in the press as that means it's across the board. I think there are areas, I'm going to talk about this later, which have been massively impacted, but there are other areas where there is actually growth, and we're going to talk through some of those later on. So I think that's something that we need to be preparing graduates for, is keep looking, don't just be defeated. I think the other thing we're hearing from employers is that they need to keep networking, even in this virtual environment. Don't just think that you can sit back and apply for roles as and when you see them. It's more about starting to build virtual networks, get out, speak to people. So if we're thinking about this community that people might join, who could they rely on as across this network, or LSE alumni or University of London alumni who they could start to reach out for and open up conversations in terms of jobs, what's out there, what sort of things people are doing. We also think and are advising people to be really proactive at the moment. Employers are very aware that summer internships, some of them have been cancelled or they've been moved online. I think what we're advising people to do is, even if your plans change, do still try and go out and get something locally. They are still really admiring the graduates who are showing flexibility and adaptability, going to local, accountancy firms, businesses, and saying, how can I help? How can I support during this period? And try to get various little portfolios of work experience that can help build your skills. So they're aware of that, and that they're looking for people to show that flexibility. That can be done through volunteering as well. This is an environment where volunteers are really needed, and employers are saying people who have tried to contribute to local or global communities, even in a virtual manner, in a volunteering sort of capacity, and shown their skills, communication, these sorts of things that way, is very attractive still to employers. And I think the final thing I would say in terms of the experience of people finishing their studies now is, it can be that people think, I'll go for a scattergun approach, I'll apply across the board, maybe not put so much effort into tailoring and targeting to some of the employers they're going for. We would probably say that the relationship building, the research, the finding out what the employers want is even more important now, and that sort of scattergun apply to lots of different firms and companies and sectors is not really working. So we would advise you to speak with your support centres, career centres, to help you to target those applications. So that's the kind of experience for students finishing studies now. I think you also wanted me, Francesco, to talk a little bit about changes to employers' recruitment and how we're seeing that at LSE, is that right?
Yeah.
Fabulous. So I'll move on to that. So we have seen a real change, and I've already mentioned this. The main change is that employers have more flexibility to be able to run all of their assessment processes online. So because of this, we are really seeing employers having more choice of which universities actually they can target, which is good from a diversity perspective. But I've got to say, in terms of LSE and thinking about how we usually attract, huge numbers of employers onto campus to have face-to-face meetings. We're having to have a lot of conversations with employers about how we can move things like careers fairs, coffee mornings, employer presentations, all of these things onto a virtual sort of environment and make it really useful for employers and students. So, for example, some of the virtual offers that employers can do mean that they can track students' data and see, for example, if employers do come to an event with them, does that student then go forward to get hired with the employer, and, you know, all of these sorts of things. So in some ways there's some good things, but I think we really do have to think about how we can ensure that we're giving employers the ability to see students and have an opportunity to see them actually, their skills in these sorts of skills-based sessions and things that we're running here at LSE. So employers are worried about digital fatigue. You know, we're on Zoom now. I'm sure some of you will be going off to other meetings on Zoom. So they're really trying to think of ways that they can set up competitions, case studies, opportunities for students and graduates to show their skills and experience through these sorts of environments, as opposed to just maybe delivering presentations to sell the company and the roles that they have on offer. So there's a real move away from the standard presentations. And the other thing I'd really like to flag is that employers are really saying that they're keeping to the same recruitment timelines, which means generally quite early. A lot of actually recruiters have already, or big employers have started to open their recruitment cycles for this year, for example, and that they might even be bringing some of their deadlines slightly earlier than usual. So that's another thing that we're seeing and that we're trying to help our current students prepare for in terms of what we're seeing here at LSE. So there's good sides to the virtual environment, but there are more challenging sides, and we're really working with employers to make sure we've got the best possible experience for students, because we do realise that you don't just want to spend all your time kind of on the screen, and you want to be getting involved in some of the work that the employers have as well. So those are some of the key changes we've seen at LSE in the last few months. I was also asked to talk a little bit about international trends, and we've got obviously a very international audience here, Francesco. So we have regular catch-ups. I recently have come off an APAC Employers Roundtable where we run fairs out in China. So usually we would be going out to Beijing, Shanghai and Hong Kong to run careers fairs out there. But we're having to run this virtually this year. In a recent roundtable, we spotted very similar patterns from our kind of big multinationals who were talking to us there. So we had the likes of Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Jardine, Swire, MasterCard on some of these calls. And again, the key things I would say to be looking out for is that their numbers are remaining similar. None of the organisations that we've really been talking to, if I take that list that I've just gone through, are looking to cut down on their recruitment numbers, or this is what they're telling us. We can only go with the messages we're getting at the moment. However, they are going to be doing it slightly differently. So, for example, if I take Citi as an example, they were saying, you know, they had to reject about 29,000 people last year. So when you're thinking about numbers like this, they're not worried about the numbers of students and graduates applying to them. It's more about how they can spot and recognise the talent within these pools. And that's the same when we're talking with our employers based in Asia, in the US. It really is a good opportunity for them to open up opportunities more globally. So it's good that they can start to interact with people in London, people in Asia, various different things. But it is actually it is actually more difficult for them to spot talent when they're not having these face-to-face interactions coming onto campus. So if I'm thinking about this audience, again, you need to be thinking about how you can differentiate yourself. And I know I'm going to be talking later a little bit more about the real skills that I think students need to be demonstrating alongside their degree and building alongside their degree. It's not just about having a really great degree anymore. It's about all of the things you're doing to build your skills preparation I think thinking about your areas of weakness and looking to take some of the opportunities we have at the moment with online courses, various different things you can get involved in to build some of these things, so that you're showing to employers that you really have got the full gambit of skills that they're looking for. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So yes, I think what I would say is, it's generally a similar picture across the board. We've got some deadlines moving slightly earlier, but numbers are remaining consistent at a graduate level, which is positive. And if we're thinking more about going on to online study, going on to further study, you know, we have quite a long lead time if we're thinking about that in terms of people who are just starting to think about coming in now. So the market will start to look very different in the next 2, 3, 4 years. So in those sorts of things, we'll have a bit of time for things to calm down from the current experience that we're going through at the moment. I think those are the key things I wanted to highlight. I could go into more detail, but I'm keen to get Terence involved in this conversation as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Elizabeth. So maybe what I can do is just share my experience as a new entrant into the job market right now. I think that'll be quite relevant for the students over here. So for me, myself, I think at that point of time, I was interviewing with 4 to 5 companies, and I was very blessed that one day suddenly one of my bosses right now, he gave me a call. So all it took was 2 phone calls and a FaceTime, and I was hired. Okay, so what I want to say is that companies right now, they are very willing to invest and hire purely based on these online interviews alone. And that is going to be the norm for the next few years. And I think it's exceptionally important that we learn how to excel in this online era. Okay, so just to share with you my experiences about how this new workplace is. So I still remember the first week at work. So I went to office, met everyone, had a great onboarding, met all my managers. But all of a sudden, on Friday, I suddenly received a message from my superiors. It says, "Oh, we are going to move from work from home. The company is going to a full lockdown." So it was a completely unexpected experience, something that we are not prepared for, something that none of us expect. And out of a sudden, I'm thrown into this environment where I was totally not prepared for. Okay, so work doesn't stop. KPIs is still fixed. It's still business as usual. But what I want to say is how we do things change and work practices change. So what I see right now that I actually did not expect is that we're actually having a lot of like virtual lunches, virtual coffee, a lot of team huddles throughout the day to make sure that we're aligned. So like maybe in the morning we meet 5 minutes, lunchtime we have 5 minutes, and at the end of the day we have another 5 minutes, just to make sure that we have that connection, we have that alignment, to make sure that everything is all in the right direction, right? And and right now we even volunteer from home. So I'm very glad to say that I've done my most volunteering in my whole life because of this company. So I mean, I didn't expect it because we are all working from home, but the reality is that everything is going to be business as usual. It's just that the mode of doing it is different. Okay, nobody's going to be an expert working from home, and everybody is still finding their way around. So I think that's a good thing because it sets the ground even. Everybody's on an equal footing right now because nobody has really worked from home like full time before, right? So I think this is a great opportunity for us as fresh grads to take advantage of, to really use this to advantage and make sure that we capitalize on this and carry ourselves out well and make use of this opportunity to really, I would say, to really take advantage of this work from home environment. Okay, so right now I would say things that are particularly important with things like LinkedIn, online branding, knowing how to carry yourself virtually. So all of these things suddenly become extremely important. Things like your online identity, because there's no time to bond over lunch. There's no more pantry talks. You can't walk to the pantry and like talk to your colleague along the way, build that relationship. We just don't get that anymore. So everything you do on that single meeting online is what's others' impression of you. So that impressions really stick. So it's more important in today's workplace to really gain that trust, like what Elizabeth said, to take ownership, to be proactive, to make sure you have that work ethic so that people trust you. And once you have these successful characteristics, all of these will really help you maximize your career. So I think moving forward, work from home, online workplaces is going to be of the future. Like what Elizabeth said, there's going to be global talent. it's going to be prevalent in times to come. So yeah, maybe Francesco, you want to talk more about maybe the economic perspective of the post-COVID market?
Yes, thank you, Terence, for your insight, and thank you, Elizabeth. So I would like to have a brief chat about what is the economics expectation about the post-COVID market. I must say that to some extent, I think you're lucky in that you are thinking now about starting your undergraduate degree. So as Lizzie was touching on, by the time you will come to the job market, 3 years will have gone by and the market will have changed. So let me tell you a bit, if we think about past recessions, say the Great Recession that we experienced in 2008, that was a quite different recession in terms of job opportunities because it was based on some endogenous variables and problems that were structural to how we conducted financial transactions that had repercussions on the real economy. So to fix that situation, and there needed to be some structural reform, at least in the financial sector, which meant that it would take longer to recover from such crisis. In particular, after the 2008 crisis, what we saw, especially with econ graduates that I'm familiar with, is that there was a shrinkage in terms of hiring from the financial sector industry, and to some extent an expansion from the consulting services industry, which compensated for that drop, so that when we think about the composition of graduates from finance and economics and management department, there was in some sense a move from one type of job to another type of job. Now, of course, the market overall after the 2008 recession shrank for a considerable number of years, but that had more an impact on the tail of the job distribution, so those with fewer skills than on the upper end, so students that we prepare either here at LSE or through our international programs. So for sure, now what do we think about the COVID recession? The COVID recession seems something that is quite different. It's somehow an exogenous shock that hit the economy and that for sure caused losses to a wide array of businesses, but it's something that we would expect once we have vaccines or cures for this disease to go away and to be able to come back to a more normal job market. Now, of course, there will be changes in how business is expected to be conducted because this experimentation that we are doing with online, with virtual provision of work will to some extent have lasting consequences in the way businesses run their business models. Remember that oftentimes experimentation and new business models come about in unexpected ways and through exogenous shocks that bring an institution to experiment in ways they wouldn't have conceived on and to improve. So we are expecting things to change, but we don't expect to some extent the market to be weak for a considerable number of years. Now there is a big discussion among economists whether this will be a V-shaped recession, meaning one that has a dip that is short and that goes away quickly. Now there are differing views for sure, but these differing views are to some extent on the time scale, whether it will be 1 year or 2 years or maximum 3 years. There are few that think that this will have lasting repercussion on the job market for years to come. Now, for sure, there are sectors that will be more affected. So if you are thinking about working in sectors that were quite social, say like entertainment, there will be considerable impacts for a number of years on those sectors. But if we think about graduates in social science, actually, I would see a silver lining. What this crisis has taught us is that we need a lot of data analysis. We need to understand how policy impacts decision, and we need to do it in a quantitative and rigorous manner, even to understand the spread of the disease, to understand how lockdown policies differentially affect sector and how you can mitigate that. So actually, what governments have been doing to a vast extent is hiring a lot of economic, a lot of social scientists, specialists with training in quantitative skills to be able to guide their policy response. And the same private sector institutions have been doing the same, because they need to analyze how their internal management policies affect their growth in particular sectors and how they can improve their business operations. So there is, to a vast extent, a need for trained social scientists, whether this be economists, finance students, management students, or other social science, that are able to tackle with this type of policy question in a quantitative, rigorous manner that leads to business success or to policy success if you're thinking about working for government. Remember that I will talk in a moment about the placement of EMFSS students and about how they do, but it's very important that you think about the public policy as being one of the relevant placement sectors. Is one of the sectors where we successfully place social scientists and where you can make a real difference to the world. So on top of thinking about financial sector, consulting, or working in industry, which are typical placement for students with our training, you should definitely think about policy as a relevant career avenue and one that is important. Also remember, as Lizzie was saying and as Terence was saying, to build your virtual skills to complement the data analytics and the statistical analysis that you will do in our degrees with further studies. Remember to be fluent, to get some fluency in programming during your undergraduate experience, because these are skills that that employers will be looking for. Now, of course, they won't expect you to be a computer scientist. They will have computer scientists in the team that will work alongside you to develop the right question. But you will be there to set out what is the right policy question. How do we test it? What should I tell to my fellow computer scientists in how we run this internal experiment into understanding how we make this company or this policy successful? So I think it's a very promising, it will be a very promising market for social scientists, despite some grim news that you see about some companies cutting jobs. And remember that even when they cut big salaries, they're keen on hiring younger students that cost less and maybe have better skills for this different world. So build those skills and you will be a success, trust me. And I mean, I think if you're starting your BSc now, it's a great opportunity, because in 3 years' time, there will be a strong market and strong need for your skills. So we're taking a long time, but I want to briefly touch on our placement record. Now, our international program team has provided me with some slides. So I'm disabled by sharing my screen. Lizzie and Stephanie, could you please add my screen sharing, because I'm unable to share the slides. I mean, I don't need I don't necessarily need you to see the slides, but since we have prepared them, excellent, excellent. There we go. Apologies. Okay. Excellent. So here we are, and these slides are meant to tell you a little bit about the placement of our graduates from the international program, in particular from the economics, management, and social science side of things. So first of all, how many of our students get actually a job after graduating from their BSc, and how many pursue further studies? Now, from the poll we had here, we had an even split. So it may be either selection, that those more keen on having graduate studies than of pursuing graduate studies are here in bigger numbers, or it may be the gap year stories. But as we can see from the chart, we have that we can see that 66% of our graduates 6 months after completing their degree, so this is of the entirety of the University of London, have a job. and 21% pursue further studies, whereas we have a 13% of students that are thinking about what to do or are still looking for jobs 6 months after graduation. If we zoom in on economics, management, and social science degrees, we can see that 80% of our graduates are employed after 6 months after completing their studies, meaning that the remaining 20% are either pursuing graduate studies or are still looking for a career ahead, but a big number is actually employed 6 months after. And I think that oftentimes the majority of our undergraduate students think about building a working experience to finesse their skills and get some sense of the job market before pursuing further studies. Let me tell you that we have many of the University of London graduates that come to LSE for MSc degrees. I have a number of them in my MSc economics degrees, and indeed we have scholarships for several of them. So I look forward to seeing many of you in 4 years or 5 years time on campus actually and being taught by me. So now where do our University of London graduates are placed in? Now this is for the entirety of the University of London, and then I will zoom in on social science degrees. Now we have professional, scientific, and technical services taking the lead. We have a 17% that works in financial sectors, meaning finance or insurance companies. You should think of this about these two as very close sectors. We have some in healthcare and social work activities. Now I expect this traction to lift in the coming years. We have some in education. We have, of course, in public administration and defense, 8% of students. These are important sectors. We have 9% in communication and information technology, and 6% in manufacturing. This must mean, you should think about this meaning that these graduates work in management side of these sectors. Now, if we zoom in on EMFSS graduates, you can see that the percentage of those going into financial and insurance activities jumps to 25%. And indeed, this is the modal placement of students pursuing an EMFSS degree. So I'm sure many of you are thinking about that as your #1 industry of where you would like to work, and indeed that's our modal placement. But the other sectors are still well represented and in similar shares. Now, this slide is meant to tell you how many of it comes from a survey we ran from our alumni, and it tells you whether the University of London degree was essential, was a formal requirement to get your job or not. Now we have a big fraction that says that it wasn't a formal requirement, but as you can see, 30% of them say that it gave them a comparative advantage relative to their peers, and 23% say that it was a formal requirement to get the jobs they were pursuing. So if we think about it, 53% of our students say that either it gave them an advantage in terms of their placement outcomes, or it was essential to secure the jobs they were aiming for. I mean, in my view, you should see the degree as providing a strong comparative advantage to many of you. Now, because SIM is one of Singapore School of Management is one of our Singapore Institute of Management is one of our biggest teaching centers. We have a more accurate figure there, and 97.4% of SIM graduates were employed 5 years after graduation, with 94% of them holding full-time jobs. So you can see that basically the vast majority of our graduates, and here we specialize on SIM, not because we are not only because it's one of our largest teaching centers, but also because it's one that runs more careful surveys with alumni, and they have one of the best follow-up rates. But you should think about the University of London degree conferring a comparative advantage. Now I'll close the graduation with these slides, which is meant to show you that the degree will not just help you find a job, but it will help you throughout your careers. If we think about 5 years after graduation, we see that 3 out of 5 students were promoted at least once, that 1 out of 4 students were in manager or senior management positions 5 years after graduation. So well in your 20s, you're already in a management position. And you should think that half of our graduates were employed by companies that were large, so having at least 500 employees. Again, these are figures for SIM, but teaching centers only because they have more accurate data, but we would expect the same figure to carry out for our other teaching centers. Now this, I will stop the share. This was a brief glimpse into our placement, but we're happy to follow up with more information. Will there be questions about this? Now, I will give back the word to Terence briefly before we go back to Lizzie. And Terence will talk briefly about his experience in preparing for the job market with an EMFSS degree. Thank you, Terence.
Yeah, thanks, Francesco. So I would say my experience as a EMFSS student was slightly unique because I'm actually a part-time student. So what this means is I actually go to work in the day and I go for night classes. So I think part-time and full-time is pretty much the same, just that one is in the day, one is in the night, but the module credit is the same. Okay, so I think even though I took the full full academic workload, I would say I got my fair share of student life, and it has been really fun and fulfilling. So I actually went for LSE for summer school. I did a year-long placement at companies like Amazon, and I also even had time to pursue my hobbies and sports as well. So I mean, I love cheerleading as a sport. I'm an athlete, a national athlete. So I actually managed to go for competitions with the school as well. So, and I think one of my most memorable times as a student was when I was actually doing my internship overseas. So I internship abroad in UK for 6 months, and yeah, it was really exciting. So I would say a typical day in my life would be to wake up at 5 a.m., study, go to work, then go for night classes. And so it was pretty action-packed, really fulfilling and fun. So I really loved the challenge. But back to your question, Francesco. So with regards to what I thought was really helpful from UOL that helped me support my search and prep for the job market, I think one of the biggest things would that UOL has provided me would be global opportunities. Okay, so what does this mean? So I think UOL has a very strong network to help us attain overseas experience. Okay, and I think none of us can disagree that in today's era, especially like what Elizabeth said at Citibank, they have to reject 29,000 students. That's insane. But yeah, I think in today's era, it's actually more important than ever to be able to stand out. And how I feel I could stand out was with all these global opportunities that was provided by my school. So for Singapore Institute of Management, what they did was they provided these global opportunities. So be it whether you're looking for professional work experience or academic exposure, there's something that they provided you with. Okay, so some of the things that can immediately come off at the top of my mind would be things like summer school, there's student exchanges, there's overseas internships. I think there was one program that was run by SIM that you can even go to Beijing and work for like TT, which is a Uber equivalent. So there's a lot of opportunities, even volunteering as well. You can go to other countries to volunteer. So lots of global opportunities at my university. So, and I think that was actually one of the main reasons why I landed my first job. So Singapore Institute of Management actually sent me all the way to UK to LSE for summer school. And honestly, one thing led to another. When I was in UK, I managed to hit up with one of the CEOs of this startup. And I mean, everything turned out well. I did my internship overseas, and yeah, I spent 6 months there, without expecting it. So I think it was a great experience, and all these global exposure, these experiences that I've gathered, whenever I shared them with recruiters, with hiring managers, this is something that they are all always very interested to hear. And I think everybody loves a good story, right? So having all these global opportunities really helped me to build up that storyline and helped me to stand out from the crowd and really be different. Okay, like what Elizabeth and Francesco said, it's not just about the education right now. We need to do so many things to be different. And for me, having this global edge really gave like hiring managers that compelling reason to hire. So I would say that that was my biggest takeaway as a student. Yeah. So maybe Lizzie, you can give some advice from a careers perspective. Like, what do you think companies are looking for when they're hiring during COVID?
Thanks, Terence. I mean, you couldn't have put it better from my perspective. We're talking a lot about narrative at the moment and helping students and graduates with what their own personal narrative is. So it's so important that you build alongside your amazing academic degree, your work experiences, your voluntary experiences, any sort of student society experiences, and these sorts of things, and build it into a compelling narrative as why you're doing all of these things to help build your experience. So look, what are companies looking for? Francesco's already given a really good update. What we're seeing is, a real interest in students with public policy kind of backgrounds or interest in going into that area. There's growth clearly around the health sector, public sector, and in areas that people maybe aren't even thinking about at this stage or haven't really thought about. The amount of data analysts and quant skills, social sciences with a really strong quant background is going to be really, really key. So that's what we're starting to see. This is also really important if you're thinking of going into research roles within, bodies and international organizations. They want to see those skills alongside it. There's obviously been a bit of a growth in logistics, supply chain, and for reasons that we're probably all aware of. You just need to look at Amazon and these sort of big organizations to think about how important these sorts of organizations are. But, the strategic leadership around these things, not the kind of necessarily on the ground work, is very important. Politics and government is going to continue to be incredibly important when we move forward in these times, and having strong leadership. So risk analysts and project managers and people who can work around government advisors, all key skills. Financial services, as I've said, we haven't heard that there's been a drop at the graduate level. Francesco's right. If savings are to be made, and we're hearing news stories across the globe at the moment, it's often more done at that senior level, and they're still keen to bring in a pipeline of talent and graduate hires to continue to bring innovation and ideas to the organisation. So we're still seeing consistent kind of levels across financial services and consultancies. Tech, of course, I would say if you're coming in to do, a history degree, absolutely fine, but make sure you're improving all of those digital data science skills alongside it. It's your responsibility, I would say, as a graduate, to ensure that you've sat there and gone, this is what I'm interested in, this is what I want to study, but I'm also going to build up these skills around it. So, what degree is important, and will degrees match future occupations, was another question leveled to me. Most organisations don't say we want this specific degree, but they are looking for that wider skill set that we've already talked about. So think about what you're studying, think about what it gives you in terms of the quant skills, the qualitative skills, but then is there anything missing? And if there is, can you do something about it during your time? Can you take some extra courses? Can you look to see what else is on offer? Digital skills, all of these things, because that's going to be hugely important going forward. But it's the story behind it. It's the mixture of the experience, work experience, voluntary experience, your own personal experiences alongside your degree, and putting that into a compelling narrative that's key. And the final thing is that kind of skills. What are the core skills that employers are saying they want people to develop? And I've mentioned some of them already. We've mentioned data, we've mentioned quantitative skills, and Francesco mentioned programming. And project management, program management, these are huge kind of roles and areas where I think if you could start to build out your skills around that, wonderful. Strategic leadership, being able to see the bigger picture and connections, key. Innovation, being creative, innovative, even if that doesn't mean you go and set up your own business, they want these ideas, they want people to be entrepreneurial within their businesses. Communication is always going to be key, but at the moment, thinking about messaging, are people putting out the right level of messaging? Are they thinking about the tone, how they go about it, will continue to be important in this virtual world. Languages have always been key. So having languages, you know, it's something that we would always kind of recommend. It's in this global environment, it's absolutely important. And I'm going to finish with that beg for flexibility and adaptability. It's the people who can show they can flex to this environment that employers are going to be impressed with, not the people who are stuck down this route of this is exactly what I need to be doing and not going to be able to flex around that to be able to show their skills. So those are the key things I wanted to provide from a careers perspective. And I'll hand back to Francesco, I think.
Thank you, Lizzie. It was very insightful. And thank you, Terence. Now we go to the Q&A session, which will be moderated by our colleague, Stephanie. And I think she will put questions to us. Maybe, I mean, I've seen many in the Q&A session. I would be willing to answer some or move some to Lizzie or Terence, but I will let Steph do it. Stephanie?
Hi there. So great discussion. Thanks so much for that. We've had quite a few questions kind of on the side from Terence, what you mentioned about what your digital presence is like, especially considering now there'll be maybe more reliance on that. So are there tips or things to consider as students are pursuing these routes about how to boost their resume on LinkedIn, or even how to make the best impression when they get to do online interviews for placements or things like that?
Okay, so with regards to, let me answer the first part, online presence. So just if you can remember anything, just remember this one thing. So just treat it like an actual face-to-face meeting and do everything that you would do normally before you meet that person. So even simple things like, let's say your daily meetings, make sure you do your shavings, make sure that you're clean cut, making sure that you're well dressed. And all of these small little things really add up to really build your, I would say, your online presence. So it might sound like something small, but it actually makes a huge difference when you actually put in that effort to really impress others. And I think that's really, really important, because that is something that as we continue to work from home, when we become comfortable, and these are the things that we take for granted. So with regards to, I think the second part about resume and LinkedIn's, how do we stand out? So like what I said, it's really about having that global edge. But if there's any extra pointers that I want to make, that I want to emphasize, would be to really stand out, to be different. The keyword, to be different. Okay, so don't just focus your resume or LinkedIn on things like, oh, how much I've scored for this exam, this module. That's just the bare minimum. Try to think beyond. Try to really set yourself apart from your peers. If you have things like maybe you like to do baking, try to set up like a bakery, like as just a side hustle. I think employers want to see these kind of things. Employers want to hire someone that it's different, and so that they can. Okay, just give you guys an example. So let's say Jack Ma. Okay, everybody loves to hear about Jack Ma. I would like to hear like how he did something different. He set up his own e-commerce company, and then he made it big. But nobody is interested in things like, oh, I saved for 60, 70 years and I finally made it big. So I mean, you get my point. So we want to see something different. We want you to stand out. And that's the most important thing, to really have that differentiating factor. So be it global opportunities, be it that side hustle, anything, just make sure you're different. And that's where you can get the conversation going with recruiters. Yeah. Back to you.
Can I just add to that, Terence? I thought that was excellent, but I was also just going to add on to it. So we're also hearing from those multinational employers that they're using LinkedIn, not necessarily to come and find you and your profiles at this stage, but they definitely are using it as a tool to share events that they're going to be hosting, running, and they want you to contribute to posts. If they post something, respond. They want you to engage in this online environment. So that's something that's really key. So don't just go down the formal channels through their websites. Make sure you are engaging with these employers in these more social and I suppose like virtual channels like LinkedIn and beyond. And the only other thing I would say is don't just collect things for the sake of it. Terence is totally right. If you're really into baking, do something with it. So join something or create something or deliver something with it. They don't want to see people who've just joined every single school society there is for the sake of it. They want you to run something or deliver something or be a position within it. They want that genuineness to come through in your like for things. And I think that's really key in any of your virtual kind of CVs, resumes, and these sorts of things as well.
Great, thank you for that. We also had quite a few questions about kind of what career paths, for instance, in economics and management, or some of the other degree opportunities that maybe are not as straightforward with a career path. I know you mentioned that people aren't often looking for the direct link. Maybe Francesco, could you talk a little more about kind of opportunities for economics graduates or economics and finance and what they might be looking at?
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. Well, economics graduates, what are they looking? What are normal career paths? So the average career path starts either with, I mean, you need to build your skill, as we've said. And I think, you know, the things that you need to do is play with the internship for sure. If you do a U of L degree, try to get summer school. Say you think in economics, finance, and also management, we build statistical skills and econometric skills. We don't necessarily always build programming skills. So try to complement this stuff with some courses in R. Show some leadership in some project development, as they've mentioned, my colleagues. But, you know, if we think about careers, you know, the normal paths are either going down to finance or going down to consulting. But, you know, there are unusual careers. Think about the e-commerce sector that is booming, hires a lot of economics, finance, and management students. They care about those students because they're trained to ask the right questions. You know, you can find a lot of people that can do careful economic statistical analysis, that can use novel techniques, but try to find a way to showcase that you have the insight in what the right questions are. Try to show that, you know, you tackle the project. I had students in societies that carried out amazing projects. They started a student consultancy that they ran on their own. They tried and such with taking together other students and such skills. You know, if you want a successful career in consulting, that's the way to go about it. Do something unusual. Show your love. So, I mean, but there are many sectors, like a lot of graduates want to go into research. We want to go into public policy. If that's your avenue, and it's a great avenue, I tell you, I'm a research economist. That was my avenue. You know, try to build research skills. Don't be shy. Become an RA of a professor. Offer even your work for free. For heaven's sake, we are not just out of money. It will be an asset that you build, which is your experience. It will be in your portfolio, if that's what you want. If you want to come study for an MSc at LSE, you know, think about which MSc you want. Do that undergraduate degree, because there it's more obvious. But then again, do some RA work for free. Build some teaching experience at your local teaching center when you're in year 3. Write a small research paper on your own or with your peers. Start a society with your fellows where you answer questions, where you try to tackle policy questions from a different perspective. So go about it creatively. But if you want something, try to love it. And loving it means doing it from now and devoting yourself, not just because you have to, but because you want to. So try to show off, try to build those skills. If you think we don't give you enough R and Python programming courses and you want them, you know, there are free courses on YouTube. Build them. Then with your fellows, start a society and do something with it so you can show that you know how to do it. So do these things. Or come to our summer school to do the data analytics course so that you complement. So there are many ways and many benefits of doing the degree you're planning on doing. And there is a close connection to LSE, so take advantage from it. So I will stop, otherwise I go on one of these long rants and there are other people that need to talk. So back to you, Steph.
Okay, thank you. I think we probably have time for maybe one more question as we're nearing the end of our hour. I thought maybe we could just wrap it up with some, we had a few questions asking about the differences in studying locally at LSE for an LSE degree versus an EMFSS degree at a teaching center, and obviously how LSE is part of it. But maybe just a little bit, Francesco, I don't know if you could provide a little input in how the economics degree at a BSc level at LSE in London the similarities and where there might be some differences.
Look, the University of London degree is kept very close to our degrees, and that's true for economics, which is the subject, of course, I know best being an economist, but it's true throughout our portfolio of offerings. So if you think about the core, the program structure is actually equivalent. If anything, I would say that the first year economics course on the EMFSS degree tends to be harder than the one we teach in-house. So you may be surprised of that. But you know, we try to give you the same skills. Another area of potential differences is that if we think on campus, we're able to offer a slightly wider portfolio in terms of year 3 courses. So of course, in the international program, we have a big 3rd year offering, but of course on campus, we're able to offer more. So I think in terms of academic content, you should think about the programs really being close, and we would like this mirroring to take place. Now, of course, you know, the composition of the student bodies are a bit different. So maybe the overall, if we just average out, the LSE local students are a bit marginally stronger. I mean, not at the top end. At the top end, I think the two groups are comparable, but it's of course a much bigger degree, the University of London degree, so the bottom end tends to be a bit larger, let's say. But I think the two programs are analog, and indeed the experience is similar. Now, of course, you know, the experience you will have depends a bit on your teaching center, so there is some heterogeneity there. But I think one of the benefits of the EMFSS degree is that it actually opens the door to LSE. So you will be able to, you get preferential access to our summer school courses, and we are keen to welcome you on campus. If you are in London, you get access to campus and to library services here at LSE, so there is a close partnership. And what we are envisioning and working on this year, which is something that I'm very keen on since I took the academic directorship, is to build a closer link between our international program and our general course program, which is a program that allows you to come to LSE for a year, study at LSE for a year, and then go back with the credit that you can use for the EMFSS degree. Now, we have students doing that already, but there is not a preferential route. And instead, what I'm keen on making it happen, and we will be working on this year, so I hope it will be already implemented when you are in your 2nd year, is that you will be able to get preferential access to this general course program so that you can come to LSE either for year 2 or during year 3 and do a full year at LSE, be exposed to LSE faculty in whichever subject you are keen on pursuing. And I think that would be a great asset, because I recognize that many of us want to study close to home. But, you know, getting an experience abroad is something valuable and something we're keen on getting, that you're able to get preferential access to. Also remember that, you know, U of L EMFSS graduates are carefully looked at in our MSc application process. We have a bunch of them every year that enroll MSc programs at the LSE. So I think doing this degree will really, you know, you can think about doing the undergraduate degree at home and then coming for a year at LSE to build further studies. And I think, you know, because the syllabus are so close, we know how to interpret U of L results, and we're keen on the top end of the court coming to campus and getting the full experience also with us. So I hope this touches on it, Stephanie. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. I think that's probably about time. We're running a little bit over schedule. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining today. It's been a really great discussion, and thanks to everyone who registered and attended. Francesco, would you like to wrap us up?
I will just wrap this up by saying that, you know, I'm delighted that I know there are many offer holders, many interested prospective students, and many even family members there with you today. And, you know, we are very keen on your interest. You know, this is a program that LSE strongly believes in because it goes with our global mission of bringing research-based knowledge to the world to make a policy difference and an impact on the world community as a whole. So we are very keen on this degree. We are adamant on working it to the full success. And as I took the leadership of the academic directorship of the entire degree, EMFSS degree this year, before I was economics convener, I rest assured that we will put in all the efforts and the resources to make it a success. So I really hope that you will enroll. I really hope that to meet you in person, either myself or some of my colleagues, when we visit your teaching center. And it's been a real delight to have you here. And I thank Elizabeth and Terence for their contribution and Stephanie for organizing this. It's a real pleasure to be here. And now I wish you all the best. And I hope to see you soon, either at your teaching center or at LSE. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.